Hi, I'm Patrick.
And I'm Liv.
And this is the Mach-E vlog. But today we're going to talk about getting solar installed at our new home.
Woo, so let's go.
So we're really excited. We have solar on our roof. It's been producing energy for 2, maybe 3 months now, but we're really excited. In this video, we're going to sort of take you through the process of getting out here to California and why we wanted solar, how we went about selecting a company, getting quotes and all that good stuff, and then actual install process as well.
So why did we want solar? I have wanted solar for a very long time. I've always loved the idea of solar in general. Like, we've had solar lights and string lights outside, and it's so cool that they can just charge up during the day and then you utilize them at night. Why not use this free energy? But before, we were not in a situation where we were able to get solar. We had a really small roof because we had a 3-story home, so it was a small floor plan, whatever, and the HOA didn't allow it. That's something that is changing for sure. But now that we've moved into a ranch. It's single story, so we have a lot more roof space. And this is a home that we're investing in. We hope to be here for a very long time. So it makes sense to invest in something that we're going to be paying off for a very long time, which is solar. We're super thrilled about it, though. We're driving EVs. We're spending our gas on energy instead. And it just makes so much sense to get this. Also, in our case, we did move to an extremely expensive electricity area. Compared with Colorado, the highs in Colorado are still lower than the lows
high prices here
for
high
electricity.
Prices,
yeah.
And going back to the EV, you know, it's sort of like, I think a lot of us go down this rabbit hole. You get an EV and you're like, yay, have an EV. I'm not burning fossil fuels to drive. But then you're like, well, wait a second, where's my electricity come from? Now, in a lot of places, there is stuff like wind and solar that's from the grid that's helping to power your electric vehicle. But we wanted to increase that. We wanted to provide our own and see if we can. So that was another big reason that we were excited to make this transition. You know, it's all about like reducing your carbon footprint, doing some, better things. But it is also, as Liv was saying, very expensive for electricity here. There's an abundance of sun where we live. So put 2 + 2 together, and we were hoping that it would make financial sense.
Which, well, we'll let you know.
Even while we were under contract on the house and we hadn't actually signed the deal to purchase the house, I started doing some research on solar because again, it's like I knew we were going to come to an area that had a lot of sun. This is a long-term investment for us. So I was already interested. So I started looking into like, how do you get solar? Who do you contact? Why and how? You might want to choose a battery or not choose a battery. It was all pretty overwhelming. So luckily, I found a site called EnergySage, and they helped out tremendously. And we've since then partnered with them. So we'll put a link down below that you can click on, and you can do all the same things. You can find research, you can get quotes, you can actually get an energy advisor to help you sort of like size your system or decide if you need a battery. But it was all of that stuff that was from EnergySage. They're not associated with any one company. They represent a ton of companies. And it was also great because like we were going through a transition here in California from different net metering rules. So they had a lot of articles that were explaining those details. So look in your area for EnergySage. They'll have like some of that same information. They'll have ways where you could research the companies, check out the reviews. And then when you get quotes from these companies, it goes in through this system and it creates like a dashboard of the quotes that people have sent you. So it's an apples to apples type comparison. You get to see like how much is it per kilowatt hour. You can see what equipment they're using, what warranties they're offering, and you sort of see all of that lined up all in one place. So it makes it really simple by using EnergySage, and that was sort of like my central go-to point. It was just awesome.
And of course, we didn't totally rely on that. We did Googling. And also, I did a bunch of polling on Facebook and Nextdoor to see what people in the local area, which we weren't familiar with in our certain case, to see what those people thought and if there were people that they recommended, if they'd had installations done that they didn't like. And so they legitimized our findings and were able to sort of provide proof that this company or that company was someone that we should avoid or keep an eye on.
Yeah, so EnergySage was a great starting point. They helped us connect with a bunch of companies, but we do a lot of extra research. So they sort of helped verify some of the things that we were finding on EnergySage. So that was very helpful to us in doing like our research. So if I were you, I would start there. You'll find information from everything from like heat pumps to batteries to ratings of different companies. So excellent starting point. Again, check out the description for more information on EnergySage. And I should add some details about like some of the quotes that we were getting. A lot of them were using the same like equipment, so that was very easy to look at. There were different like payment plans, which was a bit confusing because like a lot of times it was like they just wanted to focus on what your monthly payment is, but I like to see like what is the cost versus monthly payment, what is the interest rate and stuff. So those are the type of details that you can get, but it's also something that you need to be aware of. And the same thing with the equipment. Even though a lot of it is very similar equipment, there's slight differences. So like our inverters, they have IQ7s and IQ8s, and some companies would say, oh, you don't need the 8, but we're going to provide you with the 7. And then other companies are like, the 8 is the best, the latest and greatest. Again, a lot of those details can be overwhelming to look at, but EnergySage has like the links where you can go click and read and see exactly what those differences are, and depending on your the way that you want to build your system, you can make the right choice. We do want to say one thing about the way the financing is. The one, and we don't want to mention the company, but something that we found out is that there are some companies that what they want to do is like lease you the solar panels, so you don't actually own them. And it sounded pretty good. They came in at a pretty low rate, but then it was like, if you look at the details, it was like they were going to increase the price by 3.5%.
Yeah, I think so.
Per year.
Yeah.
So it started off low, but then by the time you get to the end of the 20 years, it was going to be a lot higher. And their argument was, well, energy prices are going up like 8% a year, so this is really good. There are ways, of course, if you pay cash, you don't have to worry about it. But pretty much everybody else, if you are financing it and have that monthly payment, your monthly payment stays the same for the next 10, 20, 25 years, whatever term you pick. So for us, that just sounded better. Like it just that number just getting bigger and bigger was something that we wanted to avoid, as well as the fact that I like knowing the fact that we're going to own the solar panels, whether or not they're still good in 25 years. The warranty is 25 years, just FYI. But it just sort of felt weird, like we're going to lease these and then we don't actually own them. Felt a little bit odd to us, but again, do your own research and see what you think.
Yeah, and we should clarify that the cost will stay the same. Like in our situation, if we roll over the tax incentive that we get.
We'll get into that.
We'll get into that, but yeah.
But basically our payment stays the same.
Yeah.
So we should be good to go.
Once we had our list of companies that we were going to consider, we then went through the process of interviewing all of them. And perhaps this is just a personal preference, but neither of us appreciate people who are too pushy. That was something that we experienced on occasion, were salespeople that were a bit pushy or were kind of trashing other things.
Yeah, there was one company that was like, just sign the contract and you can cancel it if you choose to do that. And it was sort of like, no, we're going to think about it. And the guy just like, he didn't want to leave until we signed the contract, and we still refused.
Yeah. So like with anything really, word of caution, you don't have to let anyone push you around or be pushy. This is your opportunity to interview a company that you're going to have a relationship with for potentially 25, 30 years. So you can take your time, and I'd say, in our opinion at least, if they're being pushy, that is a red flag. On another note, when people were in a couple of occasions trashing other companies or trashing certain equipment. Like, oh no, you don't need that. You don't need the i8. Oh no, that's crap or whatever. That's a red flag too. Like if they're trashing a different installer or whatever. Once we had a list of our favorites, I would say that they all sort of agreed with each other. Like, oh, you're talking to so-and-so? Yeah, they're great. You know, so you kind of get a good feeling about them. Another thing that we wanted to look into was a company that is not just working on solar. Solar is super hot right now. There are a lot of companies that are just diving into solar and are brand new, and you don't know if they're going to be around for the long haul. So we looked into companies that were invested in multiple different industries, like in our case, roofing, commercial electrical. What else are they into?
HVAC.
HVAC.
Heat pumps.
Heat pumps, so that if the solar industry stops being a hot commodity, they're still gonna be fine in all likelihood.
And we think solar, of course, is still going to be huge here in California. But as I was mentioning, the rules changed dramatically from last year to this year. So we got it just under, before the rules changed. And our sort of worry is like a company that just started, there was one that literally started during the pandemic, and they are, like the hot potato right now. They're expanding quickly, but what happens if the rule change severely affects their business? Will they be here in 5 or 10 years? And of course, there was one that was like a really small, it was almost like a mom and pop, which I generally love dealing with. But my worry is like, what happens 10 years down the road? And are they still going to be in business, or are they going to be sold? And then the final factor that we were worried about is, and the reason why we picked somebody that had some in-house roofing contractors, and we'll get to this, but we had some roofing issues that we needed to take care of. And our worry was some of the companies were rather large, but when they dealt with roofing, they were just going to contract it out, which normally isn't that big of an issue, but we were trying to get under some deadlines and worried about that. And we didn't want it to be something that wasn't controlled by the company that we were writing the check to. So if they weren't able to get us on the roofing schedule to get our roof repaired, then we didn't want to get delayed for the solar part. So that may not, like if you are not on a tight timeline, it may not be that big of a deal, and you may get some better rates by dealing with somebody that is strictly focused on solar. So again, look at your own situation. But in our situation, we wanted somebody that's all in-house, and we picked somebody that was in business for like 90 years. So win-win.
Yeah. Win-win. And just another thing is a great reason why EnergySage, or doing your own research through whatever social media you like, whatever way that you can reach the community, that vetting these people that way is useful, because we had a couple recommendations for the hot potato company, the really hot potatoes, is that what we say? The really hot company, the up and comers, the ones that were really cool. They were recommended quite a bit through word of mouth in the sort of the new homeowner industry, right? And we discovered that they were all on a networking group together, and that they get a certain amount of commission, a certain amount of money for referrals. So this hot potato company may be good, but all the referrals that we got were incentivized. So it's hard to trust that over EnergySage and community research, in my opinion.
One of the hardest questions that we had to deal with was determining what size we wanted our solar energy system to be. Of course, the more panels you have, the more expensive it's going to be. But at the same time, because the rules were changing, the way it works in California is like we're under what's called net metering 2.0, and we got in under that, which the deadline was like in April to get that done. If we add any panels in the future, it bumps us to net metering 3.0. Long story short, that's bad news for us, because net metering 2.0 is way more advantageous for us to have the way that they deal with the net metering than switching to 3.0. So we wanted to go as large as we could, but at the same time, we didn't want to put extra panels on that we didn't actually need, because then we're just paying for something that's we're never going to need. So it was really hard. I think the range, the first estimates were for 10 panels. One person went up to 20 panels. Looking at our roof, it was like the easiest to put up there was about 16 panels, which is what we did. Now, what they will want to do when you go and do your estimate is they want to know like where your house is at, how it's oriented. They'll actually get the like GPS coordinates and see how much sun coverage you get. They'll look at the like Google Earth view, and they will basically like put like a sun projection map on your roof so that you can see like where you're getting sun. And they actually even take into account stuff like the shading from trees and stuff like that. Very cool to see. It's like I would love to just like have the system and play around with it. And like, what happens if I chop this tree down? Luckily, we didn't have hardly any issues with sun coverage, so that made it fairly easy. What we did have an issue with providing to them was a history of energy usage. What they generally want to do is take 1 year of your energy usage and just look at that, and then they can figure out like how much energy you use on a daily basis. But we are new to California. We're new to San Diego Gas and Electric. We're new to this house. So it was really hard to figure that out.
Yeah, we didn't even have a month to give them, really.
Well, as I mentioned, when I first started, it was when we were still under contract on the house.
Yeah.
And then when we moved in, they were like, how long have you been there? And I'm like, well, technically, we've been here like a month, but we still don't even have a bill. So it was really hard for them to estimate. Now, some advantages that we have, sort of, is that we don't have AC. So that's like your biggest draw in the summer, but we don't have AC. But we may want AC. We also have just the one electric car, and they're going, well, you drive it home. Apologize if you can hear our siren, but I'm going to just keep going. If you drive an EV, you probably need this much extra energy production. And I'm like, but we work from home. And then most of our miles that we are doing, or a lot of our miles that we're going to be doing, are going to be on a road trip. And at first it was sort of interesting, like they didn't get what I meant by that, of why I was making that distinguishing factor. Well, when you're on a road trip, you're getting your energy from an EA station or EVgo station. So you're not getting that from your solar panels or your electric outlet coming from the grid. So it doesn't actually count. So I was trying to figure out how many local miles are we going to be driving a year and trying to figure that out. What I sort of came up with is, so, in about the month or month and a half that we had this during the winter of the house, we were drawing less than 10 kilowatt hours per day. So then if you multiply that out, then, that's about 300 per month times 12. So whatever that number is, I had all this stuff written down. So then that's sort of like the baseline that I was sort of calculating. And the fact that we don't have like AC, like, yeah, we're running the fans a lot more, but we don't have on as many lights in the summer. So hopefully that was going to be how that all played out. Then we were trying to figure out like, well, we want excess capacity. And the way I tell people a rough way to do it is like figure out how many miles you're driving with your EV that you're going to be local, not on road trips. So say like 12,000 miles. And just figure out just a rough estimate, like maybe 3 miles per kilowatt hour. So then you say 12,000 divided by that 3. That means you need an additional 4,000 kilowatt hours for your scaling of your energy system. This all gets relatively confusing. If you have at least a 1 year history, it gets a lot easier. You can just look it up and see how much you used on electricity in the past year. And that's how you size your system. If you're adding an EV, you can use a method like I was just talking about, just to sort of estimate how much extra you're going to need and then come up with your system size. In the end, we ended up deciding on the 16 panels, 6.48 kilowatt hours. That's going to provide us between 8,000 and 9,000 kilowatt hours per year based on the orientation of our house and the panels that we have. So, if you look at it, it's probably over double what we would use without the car. So hopefully this is the right size, and that's what we went with. Wait a second. Liv just reminded me, I was saying kilowatt hours for the size of our system. It's going to produce expected 8 to 9,000 kilowatt hours, but it is actually a 6.48 kilowatt system. So minor detail, and I'm usually really good about not mixing that up when it comes to EVs, but solar is still a little bit new to us.
And these are a lot of numbers and details, but this is quite a casual video. Patrick has a more nerdy video planned with all the nitty gritty, all the details. That's coming up.
Yeah, this is more of the advice. We're going to get into part 2 of this video, or not this video, but the second video is going to be
Details.
like all the details of the system, the sizing, the equipment, as well as like what it's been producing for the past couple of months. So hopefully you will subscribe and watch that one as well.
Yeah, and we do have to preface this with we've been running this system for 2 to 3 months. We may regret how small the system is, right? You often hear people say, get as large a system as your roof can handle, right? Our roof we could have a lot more on other sides of the roof. So hopefully we don't regret it, but that's also why we want to keep being upfront with you guys and share this process. So we've tried to make the wisest decision that we possibly can with our energy consumption, at the same time estimating what happens if that changes. Yeah. So it might change.
And one of the reasons why I say you don't want to oversize your system, and we don't have a battery, we'll get into that, but basically the idea is with SDG&E, our energy provider, if we produce excess electricity, the money that they pay us for the excess at the end of the year is like minuscule compared to what it actually costs to put those panels on the roof. It's, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, still learning all this stuff, but I believe they only pay us like 4 cents per kilowatt hour that we put in the system in excess. So that's far less than what we would pay to have extra panels. So we're trying to keep all that in mind.
Like we mentioned, the net metering 2.0 in our case makes it that we don't necessarily need a battery to take the best advantage of our system. In our case, net metering 3.0 makes it so anyone who is in that net metering plan would want a battery. So we have the luxury of sitting at net metering 2.0 and kind of chilling for a while.
Exactly. If you are doing this for environmental reasons, it's probably still better to have a battery. It doesn't necessarily make financial sense for us, stupid fly, but we basically looked at it and just said that it didn't make financial sense to add a battery at this time. I also think the battery prices will hopefully keep going down. And another factor is that we think that maybe in 2 years, 5 years or something like that, we will have a battery on wheels. And by that, I mean some type of EV that, we work from home, so we have this advantage as well, but it's going to be plugged in the garage like 95% of the time, which means if it has bidirectional support, we would be able to hook that into our system, charge it up with the solar panels, and then like at night, use the battery from the car. So there's some of that type of really cool technology that's coming down the road. The F-150 Lightning can do that like in emergency scenarios. We're hoping that it continues to get better and better so that it's just like having a battery on the wall, yours will be on wheels. So very cool to see that technology company. Fingers crossed I made the right decision. And the great thing is like I was saying, like if we add panels, we get bumped into net metering 3.0. From what I understand, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we add a battery, we can still stay under net metering 2.0. So we may be good to go if we want to add a battery. And don't want to get into net metering too much because it varies so much in the different areas of the country, but net metering 2.0 for us basically is, it's almost like a 1-for-1. So if we put in excess energy during the day and we need some at night, we get to draw it out at about like a 1-to-1 ratio. There's time of use stuff that we have to account for, but that's the way that goes. The way net metering 3.0 is sort of like you're putting it in and they're buying it at the commercial, or you're putting into excess during the day, and they'll buy it from you at the wholesale rate, but when you need to buy it back, you have to buy it back at the commercial rate. So a tremendous cost increase when you have to buy back the electricity you just put in. So that's why batteries make sense. If you're in California now under net metering 3.0, doesn't always make sense, but more than likely for 95%, 99% of people, you probably want to look into adding a battery if you're in California. And in your area, check with EnergySage. If you can't find an answer, use their energy consultant and they can help you decide.
And also in our situation, unfortunately, our roof was 35 years old. So any funds that we would have put towards a battery, unfortunately, had to go towards roofing, which is something that is a concern. And in our case, because the roof was so old, we decided to replace it, because why would we put solar on and then, replace it down the line? But if your roof is maybe 8 years old or something, that might not be something that you want to consider.
Exactly. And that's our next area, is talking about why, we had to deal with the roofing situation. And it was sort of interesting. And this goes back a little bit as well to the different companies that we were interviewing. And I think it was a little bit of a telling factor. Like, basically, we were told we have a concrete tile roof, and the tiles don't need to be replaced, but the paper underneath is supposed to be replaced every 30 years, I believe we were told. And in that case, it's 35 years. So we're like well beyond. And at this point, it'd be sort of silly to put stuff up on there, and then in 2 years or 5 years or something like that, we have to take everything down and then redo the roof. So we're like, we probably just want to get it done. Well, it was interesting because as we were interviewing some of the companies, they were like, "Oh, no, it'll be fine. We'll just fix the area that we need." And I appreciate the fact that they were trying to come in with a lower cost, but at the same time, I'm like, that it's going to probably cost me more in the long run, because it'll cost more to remove the panels, put them back up, get them reconfigured. I don't know. Just seemed like it didn't make sense. So it was another thing that we sort of took into consideration as we were interviewing companies. But even if you think your roof is in perfect working order, they will inspect the roof when they come out and do their site inspection after you sign the contract. They will take a look at your roof, make sure there's no damage to the area where they need to put the panels, and that it's stable, good to go. So it's a good idea to find a company that can handle that stuff for you and take care of it, and that's what we did.
The company that we picked, the roofing was going to be in-house, and when the roofing company or the roofing people showed up, it was really comforting. They were all branded with that company. Should we say the company's name?
I think so. We don't have any connection with them.
No connection.
Although maybe we should.
Yeah, I know. We chose Baker Electric. We've used them now for 3 months with our solar, so we can't say how it's going to last long term or how this relationship is going to go long term. But based on everything that we've told you, all of these things are reasons why we chose Baker. So the Baker Electric is who installed our solar ultimately, but when they came to fix the roof, it was also Baker people. They were all Baker branded. They all had hard hats. So that's
yeah,
what
they
call
had
them.
their hard hats. They were always tethered.
They were always tethered. They secured everything. Anytime there was poor weather, not only were they there on time, like at our house at 7 a.m., they were oftentimes there early so that they were at our door at 7 a.m., like starting work.
That was the biggest thing for me, because we've all had those appointments that we schedule, and I was sort of surprised they said 7 a.m. So I normally wake up at like 6:30. I woke up at 6:30, started making coffee, and as I was going back to the office, I'm like, there's a truck out in the front. And I'm like, I go in and I look, and I'm like, it's Baker. They're here. And I was sort of, wondering what they were doing. And then sure enough, at 6:55, I see them get out of the truck. They walk up to the door and they're like, hey, we're ready to get started. And they did that every single day. They kept us informed. So I know Baker is a local, basically San Diego, Southern California only company. So sorry that we can't make like a huge national company recommendation, but it goes back to, using EnergySage, interviewing companies, doing your homework. Hopefully you'll be just as satisfied with whoever you pick.
And we certainly are satisfied with the installation and the work that they did. And by the way, this all depends on why it is important to you. But they also brought their own porta potty so that we didn't have I think there were 8 people typically. So we didn't have 8 people trekking in and out using the restroom, which was not something, we didn't ask them to do this, but it's just like a default service for them. which is really cool. They consider everything about the project, and that's comforting. You know?
Yeah, it was one of the most professional companies
Yeah.
that I've ever dealt with for any type of home improvement or any like home service. Definitely by far the most professional company I've ever dealt with. Okay, so let's just go ahead and dive into like, I'm gonna walk you through the process once we signed the contracts, like how long this whole process took and what they actually did. So we signed the contracts, I think we actually signed it like January 31st to get this process started. And a little bit of that was because Baker was like, hey, we have some end of year stuff. Can you guys help us out? I'm a salesman. I was like, sure. We already knew we were gonna, go with Baker. We were just sort of trying to figure out what size and couldn't make a decision. So they were actually really nice. We signed the contracts. That was the only pushiness that you could say that we got from Baker. But then they worked through the process with us as we ended up actually adding a couple of more panels in January as we were, formalizing what we were doing with all of this stuff. So it was really easy to like modify the contract. We had approval for financing. We ended up doing 25-year financing because we got 1.9% interest, as well as we were able to roll the roof, into our financing. So again, financial details, we'll let you guys worry about that. But Baker was great. They handled the entire process. So a lot of these steps can take a very long time, but they handled everything for us except for one exception, like that we had to do on our own just because of the way it is. But they walked us through the financing. Once we got the financing squared away in the contract, they started working on the design, and they had like a little bit of a funky design, and it's still not like a little bit laid out weird on our roof, and some of that is because of little like bathroom fans and stuff like that are sticking out of our roof. So they worked with us on the design. Once they got the design done, they sent us over that we signed off on. Once we signed off on that, the whole time they were going through the process of working with our utility, SDG&E, to get the permit and permission to connect to their system. They also took care of all of the permits that the city of Oceanside needs, which fantastic to say, like Oceanside got their stuff approved in like, what was it, like 2 days? It was super fast.
It was very trippy. I was not expecting that.
In fact, I thought we were going to have way more time. I've heard horror stories where the local city can take weeks and weeks to get things permitted, and we were coming up with that net metering 2.0 deadline. So I was like, they must be really far behind, but they had it done in like 2 days. And then we had to get the permission from our HOA. I thought that was going to be another roadblock. And, we haven't dealt with this HOA before, so I was worried that they may need a lot more details or whatever. But Baker sent us over, like, here's the thing to submit to your HOA. We filled out the HOA form. The next morning we had the approval from the HOA. So they basically go through this process a lot. That was super quick and easy. The biggest delays that we had in all of this was because of weather.
Yeah, which is strange to say in California, but obviously we started doing this at the beginning of the year. So February, March is quite rainy in San Diego. And so we had a lot of rain delays. That's not really something they can do in taking off the tile of the roof when it's raining. Both dangerous for them, and it kind of destroys the whole point of protecting it.
We were really worried about that. And of course, you sort of figure it's like, well, they're in San Diego, so we're just going to have great weather. And you figure if you're in Seattle or something like that, they're used to dealing with rainy weather all the time. Well, they were just as prepared down here. We something that was normally supposed to take like 4 days ended up taking 2 weeks. We had some torrential downpours for San Diego where it rained the entire day, and poor flies.
It was actually torrential though. Like there were, what was it, atmospheric rivers.
Yeah, well, the freeway near us, they had like one of the state roads like collapsed because of so much rain during that same time period. It was crazy, but they had huge tarps, and even better, like the days where it was going to rain, they showed up and they would come and check and make sure everything was still secure. They even went up into the attic twice to check and make sure there's no leaks in there from where the tarps were. So excellent support from them. Took about 2 weeks, and they had to delay the first time because of rain, and then we had a trip, and I'm like, oh no, we're going to get like bumped to the rear of the schedule. But basically it was like we had our week-long trip, we came back, the next day they were ready to start. So it was very cool.
Yeah, and also the neighbor pointed out that one of the tarps was coming up from all the rain and the wind.
Oh yeah.
And we had them on call basically, so they popped right out, fixed it up. They were extremely available. It wasn't like we had to struggle to get them. They were just right there. They're like, be right there.
Yeah, and the tarp was just
hour.
coming up at the corner, so it looked like it was okay. But I'm not going to get up there and try to secure it or anything. But this is again coming back to like, check the companies, make sure you can trust them. Because I texted the project manager, and he said, I'll have a guy over there within 15 minutes. And it was probably like 20 minutes. So, but I give him some leeway.
Wasn't it?
No, it was a...
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, but he showed up and, got it all secure. After he left, about 5 minutes later, the project manager texted and was like, hey, he just left. He said everything's good. Are you happy with everything? And then about 2 hours later, he texted again and was like, everything's still looking good. So it was really cool. But that was like our only big hiccup. When it came time to get the solar installed, I figured that has to be hard too, right? But they literally got that done in 1 day.
It was actually less than a day. It was like 6 hours or something.
Well, they started at 7, and I think they left at 3. So it was still a long day, but it seemed early because they started at 7.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it was very quick.
And very nice people there as well. Again, Baker branded, very nice. And like live.
Even follow the roofing guy on Instagram.
The roofing, it was the solar manager.
No. Roofing.
Yeah,
was
solar.
it the solar?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we follow him on Instagram. We'll link it down below. It feels like it's been so long, which it has been, but he's a hip hop musician.
Here in San Diego.
I was going to say a hip hopper.
Yeah. And I do want to say, like, one other thing was that we modified with our contract, and I didn't necessarily do this on purpose, but it was in the back of my mind. After we sort of got all the contracts signed, I said, I emailed them and was like, hey, by the way, we mentioned that we had an electric vehicle and that we wanted you guys to account for that. Are you going to include an EV outlet, a NEMA 1450 outlet? They said, no, that's not part of your plan. I was like, is there any way you could throw that in? And they came back, they're like, well, we have to check with my manager. But it literally took them like a couple hours. They came back and they decided to just add that in because they have to have an electrician on site anyway. So maybe follow that same technique. I don't know. Maybe.
And to be fair, we heard of another friend doing that as well. So it seems like that's potentially something that you could have them throw in. So.
And then, like Liv said, the solar install seemed fairly quick. They just loaded everything up, got everything installed. They took some footage of it for us. I actually handed the GoPro to one of the installers, and he went around and toured the roof a little bit. So that was very cool, which I'll go ahead and say it. This is the footage that you're seeing right now. And then, after everything was installed, we still weren't live and on the grid just yet. The final step is a couple of steps. One, it has to be inspected by the city. So that took a couple of days to arrange. Really wasn't that long. I thought it was going to take a lot longer. Once they sign off on it, all of that stuff is submitted to the local utility. Again, Baker handled all of that. They submitted that. And they said it'll take 5 to 7 business days, I believe. Once again, it was done in like 2. So again, I thought it was going to be delayed because however many people were switching over. But we got the permission to operate, and then we were live. So we were producing energy. We did have a hiccup, and there was I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it was like a little bit of a configuration error within the smart panel that monitors the energy flow into and out of the house. It didn't affect our production, didn't affect what the utility was seeing, but in the app, it was like doubling up what we were producing and using or something like that. So they just basically, called them up, came out the next day, they fixed that. So no big deal. But that was like the only little, configuration or installation hiccup that we had with the actual solar. But we're now have been live for 2 months. We're really happy. It's a sunny day like today. It's like 6:12. I bet we're producing just a little bit because the way the solar panels are facing southeast. But we'll get into all the technical details in the next video, and I'll cover like how it's been doing, how it works on the shady days, rainy days. Well, we haven't had a rainy day really, but anyways, we'll go into all those details. So
yeah, I do want to know, are you guys, any of you who have solar, are you planning to get solar? That's the first question. If you have solar, are you as obsessed as Patrick? Because he will check the generation, the solar generation, even if we're not home. He'll be like, just sunny day down there. Let's see what we're doing.
It gets to be addictive. And one of the cool things with the app, and again, we'll get into this next time, but it shows what your energy usage is for the house. So it's sort of interesting because it's like, you made lunch at that time because we had this big spike using the microwave or whatever. So it is sort of interesting, and some of the stuff that we do want to get into even more is track some of our energy usage. And of course, it tracks the EV charging, and it totally obliterates whatever else we're doing in the house because it's such high usage compared to at midnight we have 2 lights on and maybe the refrigerator.
Yeah, and especially without AC, it's really interesting because solar and driving EVs in general can feel almost like it's free. This isn't gas or whatever, or it's free because it's all included in your energy bill or your solar bill and you're fine. But it really is crazy. Look at the spike that an EV makes when it's charging. And it's quite shocking how much energy we use just to transport ourselves. So I think in a way, it's almost been an additional education for us to be a bit more considerate of our driving, which is not to say we're not going to road trip or whatever, but it's sort of the way you think about it. Like it's not free. We're still pushing these vehicles around. We're still consuming. So we're just going to try be intentional consumers, I guess, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But we're really happy that it's installed. We're really happy that we have some sunny days, and it's almost was like fitting that it rained while we had the solar put on there. Now it's like we're hitting some sunny days. In the next video, we'll show you we had like a lot of gray days, and but overall, I think the process went a lot smoother than I thought. I think it was a bit confusing, of course, like we're going long on this video because it's a long, there's a lot of information to consider. Thankful for EnergySage for like making things very simple for us to figure out. But again, use EnergySage, do your research, use your utility bills, check with friends and neighbors. Somebody had some good advice, and of course, we didn't do this too much, but they were like, well, if you don't have history for your house, check with your neighbors. They're probably similar houses. They're in, of course, similar location. See what they have. So we walked around the neighborhood and we, checked with some other neighbors. And I wanted to mention that because I thought that was good advice. But there is one caveat, as somebody mentioned, one of the solar companies mentioned, is they said, well, just remember some of those houses that have like 20 panels, they may be from 10 or 15 years ago, and not nearly as efficient as the brand new panels with the new microinverters and stuff like that. So even though they may have like 20 panels, it may be outputting what 10 panels would put today. So again, a lot of information to consider. You get a lot of information like that.
Well, and I think pretty much for the most part, every neighbor that we talked to about their solar they kind of didn't know. So we'd go and say, wow, how big is your system? And the neighbor was like, I don't know. I gotta talk to so-and-so. They're the one who was into that. But I don't know. It's been great though. Like all of them, it was like, it's been great, but they don't know how much it's producing. They aren't doing like the full nerdy. So either we're very nerdy or it starts to fade, right? And you're just like, yeah, that's where my electricity comes from.
So now we're at the point, we're going to get to that next video. We'll film that in the next day or two. But I want to know some questions of you guys. Liv already asked some, but like, do you guys want to know more about this stuff? Are you considering solar? Are you considering energy usage? Where, how in depth should we go with tracking all of this stuff? I know like some EV nerds, we get into like how efficient is my car on cold days and warm days and all this other stuff. Do you want us to get into some of the same stuff with the solar and some of the cool things that we're doing with some home energy management, including using some portable batteries to offset some of our usage? If you do, I'm excited because I'm going to be doing that anyways, and I can talk about it for hours, but I'll keep it down to a shorter video.
Yeah, you said that now. All right, on that note, thank you so much for joining us for this video in which we went in depth into solar. I say in depth, but Patrick's gonna go in depth. So we went in depth in the process.
The process, yeah. That was the goal, is to walk you through the process so that you know what to expect.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that more in-depth video when it comes out. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video if you liked it, and you can dislike it if you didn't. That helps us know if you didn't like it.
They're probably not watching.
Yeah, if you didn't like it, you're probably not watching. Why did you get here? I don't know. A huge thank you to our patrons whose names are scrolling across the screen. We appreciate you guys so very much. You are the sunshine in our lives. And just remember that whatever you... I can't say drive. What are we gonna say for a solar video? Whether you drive on sunshine, gas, or bike powered, whatever. Enjoy the ride. Bye.
She's flustered. Bye.
Okay.